She poured oil on my disabled daughter. What she didn't know, I'm a federal judge. And now, justice is personal. Judge Eleanor Mathis had presided over hundreds of cases in her 15 years on the federal bench, but nothing in her legal career had prepared her for the scene unfolding in her driveway. "Lizzie," she screamed, dropping her briefcase as she ran toward her 16-year-old daughter, who sat confused and crying in her wheelchair, dark liquid dripping from her hair and clothes. The acrid smell hit Eleanor before she even reached her. Motor oil, slick and toxic, coating her daughter's specially adapted wheelchair and seeping into the cushions designed to prevent pressure sores. Eleanor's hands trembled as she pulled tissues from her purse, futilely trying to wipe the oil from Lizzie's face. Her daughter's cerebral palsy made her movements jerky and uncoordinated at the best of times, but now, in her distress, she was nearly inconsolable. "Mom, I didn't. I wasn't," Lizzie struggled to explain through tears, her speech more affected than usual due to her distress. "Sha, it's okay. What happened, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked, fighting to keep her voice calm while rage built inside her. She had left work early specifically to take Lizzie to her physical therapy appointment. Now they'd miss it entirely. From across the street, a sharp voice called out, "Maybe next time she'll keep off my property." Eleanor looked up to see Vanessa Harrington, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog, standing on her immaculate lawn with an empty oil container in her gloved hand. The woman's blonde bob didn't move in the breeze as she stood with arms crossed, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes but not the satisfied smirk on her face. "What did you do?" Eleanor whispered, too stunned to raise her voice. "Enforce the rules," Vanessa replied with a shrug. "Your daughter's been cutting across my corner property in that contraption for months, tearing up my grass. I've issued 3 written warnings about using the sidewalks properly. The HOA bylaws are clear about property boundaries." Eleanor looked down at the small patch of lawn between the sidewalk corner and Vanessa's property, a negligible triangle of grass where the sidewalk made a 90-degree turn. The small shortcut saved Lizzie from having to make a difficult wheelchair maneuver when she wanted to visit her friend Emma's house down the block. "You poured oil on my disabled child over a patch of grass." Eleanor's legal mind was already cataloging charges: assault, battery, hate crime enhancements. But her mother's heart was simply breaking at humiliation on her daughter's face. "I didn't pour it on her," Vanessa corrected, as if speaking to someone very slow. "I poured it on my property as a deterrent. She chose to roll through it. Perhaps now she'll learn about respecting private property." Eleanor's neighbor Ted came running from his house, garden hose in hand. "I saw everything, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with disgust. "I've got it all on my security camera, too." Eleanor nodded gratefully as Ted began gently rinsing the worst of the oil from Lizzie's wheels, careful not to splash more onto her. Other neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion. "You've gone too far this time," Vanessa called Mrs. Chen from across the street. "Way too far," agreed another neighbor, already on his phone, presumably calling the police. Vanessa seemed to realize suddenly that she didn't have the neighborhood support she expected. "Well, we'll discuss this at the next HOA meeting," she said, turning to head back into her house. "And I'll be documenting the damage to my lawn for the records." Eleanor stood up slowly, her judge's composure finally asserting itself over her return of fury. "Vanessa," she called out, her voice now deadly calm, "I don't think you understand what you've just done." Vanessa paused at her doorway, turning with an exasperated sigh. "What I've done is enforce the rules that everyone agreed to when they moved into Oak Ridge Estates. No one gets special treatment." Eleanor smiled then, not a warm smile what the one attorneys in her courtroom had learned to fear. "I'm not talking about your precious HOA rules. I'm talking about what happens next." What Vanessa didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she had just made the worst enemy possible. And Judge Eleanor Mathis was about to teach her exactly how the real rules worked. The police arrived within 15 minutes. By then, Eleanor had gotten Lizzie inside and into the shower, leaving the oil-soaked wheelchair on the porch. Ted had stayed to speak with the officers, and Mrs. Chen had brought over towels and a gentle soap she swore would help remove the oil from Lizzie's skin without causing irritation. Officer Rivera, whom Eleanor recognized from community outreach events, took photographs of the wheelchair and the oil stains on the driveway. His partner interviewed Ted and the other witnesses while Eleanor tended to Lizzie. "Mom, everyone saw me like that," Lizzie whispered as Eleanor helped her into clean clothes. Her voice was small, embarrassment evident in the way she wouldn't meet her mother's eyes. "I can't go outside again." Eleanor sat on the edge of Lizzie's bed, taking her daughter's hands in hers. "Listen to me, Elizabeth Rose. You have nothing, absolutely nothing, to be embarrassed about. What happened today says everything about Vanessa Harrington and nothing about you." Lizzie nodded but didn't look convinced. Eleanor knew her daughter had fought hard for every bit of independence she gained. Lizzie had only recently convinced Eleanor to let her wheel to her friend's house alone. This incident threatened to undo years of confidence building. A knock at the bedroom door interrupted them. It was Officer Rivera. Judge Mathis, we've taken statements from the witnesses. Ms. Harrington is claiming it was an accident, that she was changing her car's oil and spilled some, and your daughter happened to roll through it. Eleanor's jaw tightened. And the witnesses contradict her entirely. Mr. Friedman's security footage is quite clear. She deliberately poured the oil in a pattern where your daughter regularly crosses. We'll be arresting her for assault and filing hate crime enhancements due to your daughter's protected status. Good, Eleanor said, then hesitated. Officer Rivera, I should recuse myself from any involvement in the legal proceedings. As a federal judge, I understand completely, Your Honor, Rivera replied. We'll handle this by the book. After the police left to arrest Vanessa, Eleanor called Barry Klein, her trusted colleague from her days in private practice. He picked up on the second ring. Eleanor, to what do I have the pleasure? Barry, I need your help. There's been an incident with Lizzie. She explained the situation, her voice breaking only once during the retelling. Barry's response was immediate. I'm on it. I'll oversee the criminal case and will file civil charges for assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Vanessa Harrington won't know what hit her. Thank you, Eleanor said. And Barry, I want this handled properly. No special treatment because of who I am, and no holding back either. Full consequences. Understood, Barry replied. How's Lizzie doing? Eleanor glanced at her daughter, who had fallen asleep, exhausted from the ordeal. She's shaken. This might set her back. We won't let that happen, Barry promised. And Eleanor? The wheelchair. Ruined, she confirmed. The oil seeped into the cushions and the motor. The specialized cushioning alone costs thousands. Document everything. Take photos. We'll include it in the damages. After hanging up, Eleanor sat in the living room, finally allowing herself a moment to process her own feelings. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. She opened the door to find Emma, Lizzie's best friend, standing there with her parents and several other classmates. We heard what happened, Emma said simply. We came to help. Before Eleanor could respond, a news van pulled up in front of the house. Then another. Word had gotten out. Judge Eleanor Mathis' disabled daughter assaulted by HOA president was apparently too juicy a story to ignore. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from the chief judge of her district. Asterisk Eleanor, just saw the news. Take whatever time you need. We've got your docket covered, asterisk. As she was reading the message, she noticed a familiar car pulling into her driveway, her ex-husband Michael's Audi. Lizzie's father exited the vehicle, his face a storm of barely contained fury. Where is she? He demanded, not bothering the greeting. Where's Lizzie? Sleeping, Eleanor replied. Michael, I got this under control. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, pacing on the porch. Under control? Our daughter was assaulted, Ellie. I know that, she said through gritted teeth, and the person responsible is being arrested as we speak. Michael stopped pacing. Tell me what I can do. Before she could answer, another text came through on her phone. This one from an unknown number. By morning, the story had exploded. Eleanor woke to find #JusticeForLizzie trending nationally and her phone filled with messages from colleagues, disability rights organizations, and even the governor's office. Vanessa Harrington had been released on bail after spending the night in county lockup, and the Oak Ridge HOA board had called an emergency meeting for that evening. Mom, I'm going viral, Lizzie said when Eleanor brought her breakfast in bed. She held up her phone to show a TikTok compilation of security camera footage, intercut with passionate commentary from disability advocates. The video had over 2 million views. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed. How are you feeling about all this attention? Lizzie thought for a moment, absently pushing her scrambled eggs around the plate. I was embarrassed yesterday, but now I'm just angry. All these comments from other disabled people saying they deal with stuff like this all the time. She looked up at her mother, a new determination in her eyes. We have to do something, not just for me. Eleanor felt a surge of pride. Even in the midst of trauma, her daughter was thinking of others. We will, she promised. But first, let's get you mobile again. Michael had already arranged for a loaner wheelchair to be delivered that morning. It wasn't as customized as Lizzie's regular chair, but it would suffice until a replacement could be ordered. The medical supply company had expedited the process after hearing about the situation. Your dad called. He'll be here in an hour to take you to physical therapy, Eleanor said. I have a meeting with Barry and then the HOA board tonight. Lizzie nodded, then hesitated. Mom, did you see what Mrs. Harrington's daughter posted? Eleanor hadn't. Lizzie handed over her phone, opened to an Instagram post from Vanessa's college-age daughter, Brittany. Asterisk for everyone attacking my mom. You don't know the full story. That judge has been letting her kid get away with breaking rules for years because she thinks she's above the law. My mom was protecting her property. Maybe if the judge spent more time teaching her daughter to respect rules instead of playing the disability card, none of this would have happened. Hashtag their two sides asterisk. The post had thousands of comments, most condemning Brittany, but some supporting her perspective. Eleanor handed the phone back, trying to keep her expression neutral. Ignore it, she advised. The Harringtons will face their day in court. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Barry Klein's office was a stark contrast to Eleanor's austere chambers at the federal courthouse. Where her workspace was all dark wood and leather-bound legal tomes, Barry favored modern furniture, abstract art, and enough technology to run a small spaceship. We've got her dead to rights, Barry said, sliding a folder across his desk. The criminal charges are proceeding, but I've also prepared civil filings. Assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violations of the ADA, and I've added a premises liability claim for good measure. Eleanor flipped through the documents, nodding. What about the HOA situation? Barry's grin was wolfish. I've been waiting for you to ask. I had my associate pull the Oak Ridge HOA bylaws and covenant conditions. Turns out their accessibility compliance section hasn't been updated since 1992. It doesn't meet current federal standards under the Fair Housing Act amendments. Meaning the entire HOA has been in violation of federal law that you happen to enforce professionally. The irony is delicious. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. I can't be directly involved in any federal action, Barry. Conflict of interest. Of course not, he agreed. But I've already reached out to the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. They're very interested in making an example of Oak Ridge Estates. Eleanor nodded, then hesitated. What about the publicity? The last thing Lizzie needs is more public attention. Too late for that, Barry said gently, turning his monitor to show her a cable news segment discussing the incident. The chyron read, Federal Judge's disabledegagchter attackate by HOA president. Eleanor winced. This will follow her forever. Not necessarily, Barry countered. Right now, she's a victim in the public eye. But we can help shape this into a story about advocacy and change. Lizzie's strong, Eleanor, and this incident could lead to real improvements for other disabled kids if we handle it right. Eleanor thought of Lizzie's words that morning, asterisk, we have to do something. Not just for me, asterisk. You're right, she conceded. What's our next move? The HOA meeting tonight. I'll accompany you as your legal counsel. They called for Vanessa to step down as president, but I suspect she won't go quietly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Oak Ridge Community Center was packed beyond capacity. News vans lined the street outside, and reporters shouted questions as Eleanor and Barry. 3 weeks after the incident, Eleanor sat in her chambers reviewing case files when her clerk knocked on the door. Your Honor, your ex-husband is here. He says it's important. Eleanor looked up in surprise. Michael rarely visited her at work. Sent him in. Michael entered, looking more polished than usual in a tailored suit. As a professor of environmental engineering at the State University, he typically favored casual attire. You look nice, she commented. Court appearance. Meeting with the architectural firm, he replied, setting his briefcase on her desk. They finalized the plans. Eleanor smiled. After the HOA meeting, events had moved quickly. The board had voted 6-1 to remove Vanessa as president. The dissenting vote came from Vanessa herself, who had stormed out declaring she would sue everyone involved. The next day, Michael had proposed a community project to make Oak Ridge truly accessible, volunteering his engineering expertise. Show me, Eleanor said, clearing space on her desk. Michael unrolled the blueprints with pride. We're calling it Lizzie's Path. It will connect all the main areas of the neighborhood with wheelchair-friendly routes. No more awkward corners or unnecessary detours. Eleanor studied the plans. What had started as a terrible incident had transformed into something positive. Neighbors had rallied, donations had poured in, and the university's engineering department had adopted the project as a case study in accessible design. It's perfect, she said. How's the fundraising going? We've raised almost $300,000, Michael replied. That's 3 times our original goal. Local businesses keep calling to contribute. That news segment Lizzie did last week really touched people. Eleanor nodded, feeling a mix of pride and concern. Their daughter had become the unexpected face of disability advocacy, handling interviews with a poise that surprised both her parents. While Eleanor worried about the exposure, she couldn't deny that Lizzie had found her voice through this ordeal. Have you seen this? Michael slid a newspaper across the desk. The headline read, Harrington Real Estate Empire Crumbling Amid SCNDL. Eleanor skimmed the article. Vanessa's husband, Douglas Harrington, owned a real estate development company specializing in luxury subdivisions. Following the oil incident and subsequent publicity, 3 major projects have lost their financing, and the company was facing a discrimination lawsuit from a former employee who used a wheelchair. "I take no pleasure in this," Eleanor said, pushing the paper away. Michael raised an eyebrow. "None at all." "Well, perhaps a small amount," she admitted. "But it's the system working, not personal vengeance. Actions have consequences." Her phone buzzed with a text from Barry. Asterisk, Judge Sanders just denied Vanessa's motion to dismiss. Criminal trial set for September. Civil discovery proceeding as scheduled. Asterisk. Legal updates. Michael asked, noting her expression. "Yes, Vanessa is still fighting everything, still claiming it was an accident." Michael shook his head. With multiple witnesses and video evidence, her lawyer should be advising her to take a plea. "Pride," Eleanor said simply. She still doesn't believe she did anything wrong. Her clerk knocked again. "Judge Mathis, your daughter is here with her friend Emma. They say they have a surprise for you." Eleanor checked her watch. "I have a hearing in 20 minutes. They're very insistent," the clerk added with a smile. "Send them in." Lizzie wheeled through the door in her new wheelchair, followed by Emma and Ted Friedman, whose security footage had been crucial evidence. Lizzie's chair was sleeker and more advanced than her previous model, with custom padding and controls adapted to her specific needs. "Mom, we did it," Lizzie announced, her face alight with excitement. "Show her, Ted." Ted handed Eleanor a tablet. On screen was a petition titled Lizzie's Law, with over 50,000 signatures. Eleanor skimmed the text, which proposed strengthening penalties for disability-related harassment and mandating accessibility training for HOA board members nationwide. "A state senator contacted us yesterday," Ted explained. "She wants to sponsor it in the legislature." Emma created the website and social media campaign. Emma beamed. "We've got disability rights groups from 5 states endorsing it already." Eleanor felt her throat tighten with emotion. "This is remarkable," she said, looking at her daughter with new eyes. The traumatized girl from 3 weeks ago had transformed into a confident young advocate. "And there's more," Lizzie said, handing her mother an envelope. "Open it." Inside was a formal invitation to serve as keynote speaker at the National Disability Rights Conference in Washington, D.C. 9 months after the oil incident, winter had settled over Oak Ridge Estates. Christmas lights adorned most homes, including the Mathis residence, where Eleanor was hosting a celebration unlike any other in the neighborhood's history. "Careful with that banner." Michael called as Ted and several other neighbors secured a large sign across the community center entrance, "Grand Opening, Lizzie's Path." Despite the December chill, nearly the entire community had gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The accessible pathway network, which now connected all major areas of the neighborhood with smooth, wheelchair-friendly routes, had been completed ahead of schedule thanks to unprecedented community support and volunteer labor. Inside the community center, Eleanor watched Lizzie holding court near the refreshment table. Now 17, her daughter seemed transformed, more confident, more outspoken, and surrounded by both old friends and new admirers. The traumatic incident had somehow catalyzed something powerful in her. "Quite a turnout," Barry Klein said, joining Eleanor with a cup of punch. "The media's outside too, local stations, plus that CNN reporter who's been following the story." Eleanor nodded. "Lizzie's handling it well." "She's a natural," Barry agreed. "Have you seen the final enrollment numbers for the accessibility design course Michael developed?" The university had to add 2 more sections next semester. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression tightened. "It's from the courthouse." She stepped into a quiet corner to take the call, returning moments later with a complex mix of emotions on her face. "What is it?" Barry asked. Judge Freeman just accepted the plea deal in Vanessa's criminal case. For months, Martin DeVries had fought aggressively, filing motion after motion, attempting to move the case to another jurisdiction, and even orchestrating a media campaign suggesting that Eleanor had weaponized her judicial influence. But as witnesses stood firm and evidence mounted, Vanessa's position had weakened. 2 weeks ago, the prosecution had offered a deal. And, Barry pressed, guilty plea to misdemeanor assault, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service specifically with disability organizations, mandatory sensitivity training, and a permanent restraining order. Barry frowned. "That's more lenient than we hoped." "There's more," Eleanor said. As part of the agreement, she's required to make a public statement acknowledging what she did and apologizing to Lizzie. "When?" Eleanor checked her watch. "She should be at the courthouse steps right now." Barry pulled out his phone, quickly finding a live stream. They watched as a subdued Vanessa Harrington, standing beside a somber Martin DeVries, approached a bank of microphones. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. She looked older, tired, dressed in a simple gray suit. I'm here today to acknowledge that on May 15th of this year, I deliberately poured motor oil on a pathway that I knew Elizabeth Mathis regularly used in her wheelchair. Vanessa began reading from a prepared statement. My actions were cruel, discriminatory, and inexcusable. I caused physical and emotional harm to a disabled teenager out of petty territoriality over a small patch of grass. She paused, seeming to struggle with the next part. I want to apologize publicly to Elizabeth and to the entire Mathis family. What I did reflected the worst kind of ignorance and prejudice. I have lost my position in the community, my husband's business has suffered significant damage, and my own children have faced backlash because of my actions. DeVries whispered something in her ear, and she nodded before continuing. As part of my plea agreement, I will be performing community service with organizations supporting people with disabilities. I have also agreed to sell my home in Oak Ridge Estates and relocate after my probationary period. Questions erupted from reporters, but DeVries quickly ushered Vanessa away. Barry turned off the live stream. Selling her house wasn't part of the plea, Eleanor noted. That must have been her choice. Would you want to live in a community where everyone knows what you did? Barry asked. Besides, the civil settlement wiped out most of her assets. Between her case and the class action from the other HOA residents with disabilities, she and Douglas are nearly bankrupt. Eleanor felt no satisfaction at this news. It didn't have to go this far. No, Barry agreed. It didn't. One act of basic human decency would have prevented all of it. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Chen approaching with an elderly woman Eleanor didn't recognize.